Hey guys, welcome back to another evening in the Stormcave where stories live and breathe and where family memories centered around sharing those stories together are cherished. I'm your host, Grant Walker, and I'm here with my co host, Jenelle Schmidt. Janelle, we have a special guest here tonight and well, this morning. And first, how you doing? And then go ahead and introduce our guest for today.
Well, I am doing well. We had a last minute sleepover here last night, so this morning was a little bit more uh, crunched than I thought it was going to be. They stayed up till 4 a.m. Anyway, I did not stay up till 4 a.m. though, so I did hear them bouncing on the trampoline around 1. So
Oh, golly.
high schoolers are great. I love them. But I am super excited to chat with my friend H.L. Burke. I'm going to refer to you as Heidi because calling you by your initials is weird. Um, but H.L. Burke is the author of what, 50 published novels now?
I think Rescuing a Supervillain was number 50. So I've got Courting out now, so that would be 51. But then I'll
Okay,
forget
yeah.
how many I have next week. So
Well, you've been saying for years that you are the author of more books than you can count, not because you can't count very high, but because you've published a lot of books. And I think that has always been true. But once you get to 50, really, I mean, that's
I
epic.
lost the plot around 22. And
Yeah.
then I was just like,
You're like, I don't know. I can't keep track of this
I give
anymore.
up.
So Heidi writes a variety of fantasy. I found you because of the Fellowship of Fantasy Indie Book Club, which has been going for quite a few years now, and your Dragon and Scholar series, I think, was the first one that I read. But for the last 5 years, you've been writing strictly superhero
Yeah, I
fantasy.
started I started writing them in 2019. The first one was published in January of 2020. So
Yeah.
almost exactly 5 at this point. 5 years.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so welcome. And how are you doing today?
Pretty good. It's beautiful here today. I had moved outside because my house is a train wreck. We're kind of in the middle of a constant, very long-term remodel. So there's plywood on the floors. Half of the walls are knocked down, and it's just not really something I wanted as my backdrop.
That's fair. That's fair. We had our brother on for the last podcast, which isn't out yet, but he was just doing his laundry the whole time, so we don't stand on ceremony, but I love your backdrop. It's lovely.
Yeah, it's my
Glad you
floors.
have nice weather.
Well, you
Heidi,
could have
hi.
had me out here during a thunderstorm. We get that a lot around here. It's been a very rainy and thundery year.
I miss
Yeah.
thunderstorms. That's one of the things I
Oh.
miss about the Midwest. I don't know if you enjoy them, but I definitely
I do, unless they take down the power or a
yeah.
tree, and then it gets kind of
Yeah.
kind of sticky.
It's true. There are there are the negative sides to the I like the power and just the beauty of them from a distance.
Yeah.
Yes, when they
Yes.
come into your home, that's where I draw the line.
They knock on the door.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
They're like, "But
Well,
I need water."
that's right. Water and
Exactly.
power come in pretty handy down here.
Just
Yeah.
the basic nice things.
Well, Heidi, I have a number of questions. I actually I have read one of your short stories. I hope I say the character's name correctly, but I have read the story Alancia's Dance.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I believe that would have been from a while ago. But one of the things that really struck me as I was kind of looking through your stories is the number of books that you have written or the stories that you've had published, but also the scope of the genres. I guess, you said it would kind of be a variety of genres within fantasy. But just to me, that's exciting. I think when I've kind of worked into doing filmmaking, the number one piece of advice is, oh, you have to find your niche and stick to just this one thing and become really good at that one thing. And to me, that seems kind of boring. It's like, oh, I would love to try a variety of different ways of telling stories or different kinds of stories to be told. And so that was cool to see all of the variety in the stories that you've written. So, but first, I would love to hear how you got into writing, what drew you into that. We've talked about that on our show before is a lot of times it comes from a heart that loves stories, but it's interesting that someone can take that and say, "Oh, I love taking in stories, but I have stories that I also want to share because it's a lot of work." And so it's obvious that you've put in a lot of work, but I'm curious where that love comes from.
So it's always been kind of a social thing for me. When I was a kid, we had this one group of friends there were three of us, three of them, all born the same year. So it was like match up for us. There was the oldest daughter and me were the same age. The middle son and their middle son and my brother the same age, and then poor Robin, my sister, and poor youngest boy got paired together, and they weren't always happy about that. But we would go out and do fairly elaborate play scenarios where usually we were orphans. We both read the Boxcar Children, so usually we were orphans who were running away for whatever reason and had to live in a tree or something, and someone was always chasing us. And it got to the point where I would go home and I would write down, like, almost cataloging the adventure for the day, and then I would bring it back and they would read it over. And it went from me just recording to me like riffing and making us do stuff. So basically I was writing fan fiction for ourselves at that point.
That's
And I
awesome.
did that for probably oh gosh, up until I was 11 or 12, and then I started doing Star Wars fan fiction for the same friend group. And I would literally be writing when I started writing my own fantasy version. I read a Stephen Lougheed book and didn't like it and thought I could do better. And so I was started this fantasy epic, and I would literally be sitting there with like a trapper keeper and filled with notebook pages and a gel pen, and I would write a page and then hand it off to Ashley across the table, getting those interactions. And I just like it. It feels very collaborative to me, even when I'm mostly the one doing the work, just because I like that back and forth, and I like sharing these ideas. Like, these things are in my head and I can put them out there. It's almost the point where I can't not do it. And if I'm writing too much, I have to stop and talk to my Discord group or make an excuse to ask a question on Facebook because I need somebody to talk to me about this.
Yeah. So you
So
come at it from more of like the social. You're more of an extroverted writer, which I think is a little bit more rare.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. So then that kind of leads me into that next question of, obviously, I think right now, or for the last 5 years, have really been focusing on the superhero genre, maybe. But when I see all of the different genres that you have kind of, we'll keep, I dived into,
dabbled in.
dabbled in.
Devil.
Uh,
Ooh, there we go.
what are the stories that got you excited about writing, and what causes you to drift into or dive into a specific genre and stay there for a while, and then what draws you out of that to say, oh, you know what, I want to start writing about this now?
So I think breadth is more important to me than depth when I'm looking at a story world to kind of get myself into. I like a lot of material. Like the franchises that I was most into when I was a kid weren't necessarily the deepest ones. Like, there was the Boxcar Children and there was Nancy Drew. Um, but they had a lot of room to play because, but for one thing, I think the formula in them really helped me learn story structure. It got to the point where I could, like, make up my own Nancy Drew novel in my head just by switching around a few elements if I wanted to. And uh so I was really into that kind of thing and like exploring the story elements and stuff and what's going to happen next. And so I got into that. When I got into some deeper fiction like Lord of the Rings, and I was really into Lord of the Rings. I was into Narnia for a while. I love Lloyd Alexander. I would just look for anything that had a big catalog and try to read everything. And I tried to read every Jules Verne. I tried to read every let's see. Like, if I found a shelf that had like a large amount, I was happy. Like, Lloyd Alexander had a good amount of books. But oh gosh, I kind of forgot what the question was.
What
I
makes you go into a different, like, dive into a
Yeah.
different genre or different flavor of the fantasy genre?
So, when for writing, it's just I see something and I get an idea for it and it won't let me go usually. Um, and it can be a weird thing that sets it off. And sometimes it isn't even the genre that sets up what Nissa Glass is my only like pure steampunk series. It's doesn't have any magic in it. It's got some technology that is very improbable to impossible that could kind of stand in for magic, but it's not magic. Um, but what got me into that was I was playing a lot of those point and click adventure games. And I kind of
Okay.
I wanted to write a story that was kind of like one where there was a character dropped into a situation who had to solve puzzles to get out of it. And then after a while, I just kind of had, well, I have to put an aesthetic on this. And steampunk is a very it's easy aesthetic to pop onto a story.
Yeah.
So that kind of came out of that. Other times I'll be like, sometimes I'll be very intentional about it. Like, if I've done some experiments of trying to write for market, and I know what fairy tale romance should look like, and I know what romantasy should look like for a bit. So I've done a couple series where like, okay, I'm just gonna try to do it this way and see how it works. But for me, genres are a little bit like hats you put on a story structure, especially within fantasy. Like Spellsmith and Carver originally came out of a this is an interesting tidbit. The original Spellsmith and Carver books are based on a kind of abandoned draft of The Dragon and the Scholar, where Ewan had a best friend named Jeff. Uh, and
Oh,
I kept those two characters around, and Jeff didn't make the final cut of the final of the book. So I think he got kind of replaced by Martin, but not really because they were very different characters.
yeah.
And Jeff and Ewan had this huge backstory about how they used to be rivals and eventually became best friends and stuff like that. And as I couldn't make those two characters work, and I just kept putting them aside and putting them aside. And finally I realized the problem was I'd made a power imbalance because in the story Ewan was the prince and Jeff was the pauper. But with their personality types, uh, basically Jeff was Oric and Ewan was Jericho, and I needed the personality type who was stronger and a little bit more of a man's man to actually have the disadvantage of being the poor one to balance it out. Because Oric was the not as strong personality compared to Jericho. He gets bullied a little bit if Jericho wants something. Um, it works a little better if Jericho is the one who has the disadvantages.
Yeah.
So once I switched that around, I was like, okay, well, I can't just rewrite the Dragon and the Scholar setting. I have to figure something new. And since I'd been doing steampunk, I'm like, okay, put the steampunk hat on it and get going.
Cool.
So things like that happen with me. Like I'll carry ideas around until I find where they can be put together. It's like I have puzzle pieces in my head, and every so often I'll come and see if they'll fit together. And if they don't, I put them back, and I keep trying until they work.
One of the things that I've enjoyed asking, one, I love it when you guys as authors talk about your characters because it sounds like you're talking about old friends or acquaintances or somebody that just lives right down the street that you've known for your whole life and like, oh, I can't believe
Well, they
this
live in your
guy.
and there's some of them who I can't get away from. Like Jake Powell is the main one. Like he is constantly in my brain, even when I'm not writing about him.
Oh, that's amazing. That's what Janelle, I know you have,
Jake
but
steps off the page. I mean, I that doesn't surprise me at all that he won't leave you alone because I know he's a fan favorite. I know he's my kid's favorite. He's my favorite. Let's just be honest. What, Grant?
I was going to say, John, I know you have, but Heidi, have you seen the movie The Man Who Invented Christmas?
No, I'm aware of it and I keep meaning to, but I don't watch a lot of movies.
Right on, right
Like
on.
maybe I watch maybe 2 movies a year, and it's
Oh,
not like
wow.
yeah, we don't like we're not a TV watching family. Our entertainment of choice is gaming.
Oh, really?
And
Okay.
yeah. So a lot of times we'll be if we watch something, we have to make a whole big deal of it and like set everything up. And right now we don't even have the TV set up because of the
Oh,
remodel.
right
But
on.
yeah. And it's we were trying to do family movie night for a while, but we're just gamers. We just would prefer to be video gaming.
That's awesome. That is something that we hadn't talked about, but like video games together. I don't know. Is that something that you guys do together, like playing specific games, or what type of games are you playing?
So we've tried playing together a little bit. My daughters will play together. They like Roblox and horror games, things where you're getting chased around by a monster.
Yeah.
My daughters like to play Stardew Valley with me occasionally, but that's just to mess with me. Like Claire will do things like move furniture in front of my door so I can't get into my cabin, and they'll laugh at me.
That's awesome.
This sounds like my kids have been all into Animal Crossing lately, and they just go in and like they go into each other's cottages and then turn on everything in each other's cottages so that when they come home, the vacuum cleaner is going.
She took all my farm money and went
Oh
to the
no.
festival and bought the big rabbit and with all my farm money, and then she put the big rabbit on my bed so I couldn't get to sleep. And I play Lord of the Rings online with Corin sometimes, which is I have 2 games that I keep coming back to. They're Stardew Valley and Lord of the Rings online. Everything else is kind of transient, but those 2 are the ones that I'll go through periods where I don't play them for a month, and then I'll be back in them. They'll be all I do for a few months, and they kind of take turns. Corin uh, likes to play Lord of the Rings online with me, but otherwise she doesn't like it that much. She says it's too slow. So, which it is. It's a very broad scope game that people just run around in circles and they don't really have like a lot of progression usually. Some there is progression in Lord of the Rings Online, but a lot of people are just there to look at the scenery and stuff.
I've often thought that if I was in
Mm.
Middle Earth, I would have had a hard time, you know, taking the ring to Mordor because I would have just been enjoying the scenery.
Just been sightseeing. Yeah, that's what I do. It's like I get distracted and I'm like, "Hey, look at me. I'm in Allen Hen," or "Look at me. This is the window to the west."
That's right.
I'm always
Just
taking
gonna
screenshots
stand
like, "Here,
here
Matt,
and
look where
look
I
at
am.
it.
I'm on top of the Argonaut."
Selfie with Barad-dûr.
Yes.
I have done that. I did a selfie with Sauron on one of the quests.
Nice.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk specifically about well, actually before we talk about that. So, because I'm interested in this too is and just kind of picking up pieces of it. Your process for writing a story sounds like one you're very familiar and uh very close to your characters, but also just how do you go about when you've written as many stories as you have? Do you have a process to where it's like, hey, when I sit down to write, I know exactly where this is going. I've got an outline. I've got everything sketched out. I've got the backdrop with all the pictures and the lines on it, or is it an organic thing to where it's like, oh, this story is taking me in this direction, and this character jumps in, but no, now they've jumped out, and now they're going to be in a different story somewhere else. What is your process for putting these stories together?
Definitely evolved. When I first started, I had what I called a to-do list for my characters, and then they'd be just like one sentence plot points that I need to remind myself to hit. And I would just work towards the next one in a row and kind of scratch them off. But around Cora and the Nurse Dragon, Cora is the book that changed my writing process completely. Um, because it was like October 20th, and I was going to do NaNoWriMo that year. Well, actually, I was going to skip NaNoWriMo this year because I just finished, gosh, one of my other books, maybe Beggar Magic. And I was like, well, I just finished the book. I don't want to start a book right away. But then I got this idea for uh, when I was a kid, you would have those coin machines that had the little plastic things and you get them and they have a little toy in them. And sometimes there's a
Yeah.
cool toy, sometimes a lame toy. And I was thinking, well, what if that was with pets? What if it was with dragons and you can open up the toy and get a dragon? And so that idea just grabbed me right away. I'm like, oh, I got to write this. I'm like, well, it's like 5 days till NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. And I want to save that word count for now. I'll do NaNoWriMo with this story. And since I couldn't get started without cheating on my word count for National Novel Writing Month, I said, well, and the story was coming so strong in my head, I just sat down and I wrote this like scene by scene synopsis of it. So like a paragraph per chapter.
Hmm.
And when I started writing, I have never written that fast. Like it was insane. Like it used like I've always I've always managed to win National Novel Writing Month, but I wrote unfortunately Cora's a middle grade novel, so it didn't even end up being 50,000 words long. It's like 30. But I wrote that in 2 weeks. And I'd never
Wow.
done that before.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, this system works for me. So after that, I think the next books that I wrote were the Nissa Glass series, and I just and then it worked again. There are often points where I get to that end area and I realize because of things that have changed along the way, little quirky things that I thought would make sense or things that I thought would be right for the characters are no longer right for and I'll do some last minute adjustments. Usually the end doesn't change too much, but how they get there usually will change, especially in the finicky little storming the castle things where they have to make a plan and all of a sudden I'm like, really that doesn't work logically the way I thought it would when I was writing this like synopsis. I like to joke that the worst part of story writing for me is rope. Because when you get to a plan, I always am like, well, how are they going to get into the castle? I'm like, well, they'll do something with rope. And we'll get there and I'm like, that makes absolutely no sense now.
And even if it did, I gotta go
Yeah.
back and explain how they're carrying 400 feet of rope with them everywhere they go.
Yes. So yeah. So rope is my shorthand for the steps you actually have to take for a plan to work, as opposed to just like that place where Kronk pulls down the uh readout and produce groups. Like for it doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense, but we did it anyway. You can't just skip over that. It's like, well, somehow they got into the castle. Somehow Palpatine returned. You can't.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
You know, I think Tolkien did that. I think that's why we have Elvish rope. Because it does
It's the
not
magical
make
rope.
sense
Yeah.
that Sam and Frodo could get as far as they did without rope.
Yep. Yeah. So rope is that's the part that always gets me is I get to the end and I'm like, I really have no idea how they were supposed to break into the facility, which is what this one line in my plot synopsis says.
Oh, no, now I have to figure out how to break into his facility.
Yes. Or sabotage a car or,
I just
I don't know,
assumed my
anything.
characters would tell me how to do this.
Yes.
So, what caused 5 years ago, or however long ago it was that you started diving into the superhero genre? What caused that shift, and what has kept you in that genre?
So, Fate and Prism are characters I've been carrying around since I would say about 2008. I think I was pregnant with my daughter. So that would have been 2007. Well, whenever the Edward Norton Hulk movie was in theaters.
Okay.
Because I remember I went to see that movie with my sister, and it was okay. It's one of the more mid Marvel offerings, and the part that really annoyed me was there was very little chemistry between Liv Tyler and Edward Norton in that. Like, I just didn't buy the romance at all, and it was supposed to be such a major plot point, and I didn't like it. And so I was sitting there kind of like rewriting my own two superhero OCs in my head, and at the time Matt would have been deployed, and this comes up again, but so of course I try not to make every character, especially the two romantic interests, me and Matt, but that time I did because I was missing him. And I had some ideas for some scenes. I think the scene in the end where Fade sacrifices himself for Prism was the first scene I envisioned. Um, and then uh, I put it aside and I didn't come back to it because superhero stuff intimidated me at first because I was very afraid of writing real world stuff. I feel like when you're writing fantasy, you can make stuff up and no one's going to contradict you, but
Right.
there is some anxiety when you're writing real world stuff and people are going to be, well, cars don't work that way. Well, the military doesn't work that way. Well, elevators don't work that way. And I'm like, but like it intimidated me a little bit. But so in 2019, I was having a rough time. Matt had injured himself. He was getting medically separated from the military, and nothing was going right. His retirement from the Marines was it was a mess. The doctor screwing up paperwork. He sent us up to Oregon to go house shopping while he was finishing up the paperwork. It was supposed to take like a couple months. It ended up taking almost a year of us living in separate states. And I was a wreck at the end of that. And I missed him a lot. And I kind of pulled out those two characters again because they were two Matt and me characters. And I also started building up like the support system for Prism, which came her team because I was like, well, I need these things and she's going to have these things. And I kind of just, it was almost like a process of supporting myself through it. And the problem with superheroes, which I didn't realize when I got into it, is because the world by nature has so many side characters, they all want their own stories. And like every time I finish a book, I'm like, oh well, what's this guy? That's what happens. Like I end up with Glint wanting his own story. I end up with uh Braden from the second chance superhero. He was not supposed to have his own story. I keep
You're
telling
never
myself,
gonna
oh,
be
maybe this is the
without?
last one, but
And then a great cry goes up from your fan base. No, not the last one.
I still am not sure how I'm ever going to do a Cody spinoff because people keep asking for a Cody spinoff. I don't think the world is ready for a Cody
Oh,
spinoff.
I mean, I understand the appeal. Cody has grown on me. It's very funny. My oldest daughter, Leanna, she has gotten into your superhero stuff and she started with the YA series. So she met Cody after he had like been tamed down a little bit and matured. And then she went back and read the first series. And all of her friends who have only read the YA series, because she's like introduced your books to all of her friends, they're like, Cody's our favorite. And she's like, uh
Yeah, he's got to be like 40 now. I think when I introduced him, I was kind of implying, I never said his age outright, but he was probably late 20s, early 30s. And it's been enough time that he's probably calmed down a little bit.
Yeah. It's kind of the weird uncle character
Yeah.
now.
And the thing I like about Cody is uh, he's this weird guy who lives in his basement, but he really just wants someone to play his games. Like,
Mhm.
he shows up and crashes on your couch and then hacks your TV so you have streaming services and then
Raises cockroaches in
out
your living room, so
and outstays his welcome. So it's like, but he really wants to be friends. He just doesn't quite get other people's boundaries,
right.
which
Or
is funny because he's
interests
got a
or
lot of his own.
that's true.
Yeah.
He's he's a fairly complex character for being a very side, like, small character, so,
Yeah. He's
yeah.
got a distinct voice,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
Do you find, like, when you have a side character that you dive into another one of their stories or say, "Oh, I wanna go write this story," is that because, "Oh, I just feel like there's a story to be told there," or because, "Man, I love spending so much time with this character that I want," like you said, the character just stays with you?
it can be a little bit of both. Like, to me, Casey didn't really have a lot of depth when I wrote him because he was supposed to be a comic side relief, but I didn't want him like the thing about characters. I think I saw this in a thing. They were talking about movies like Groundhog's Day and oh gosh, they gave a couple other options, but they said that what makes the story world feel so real is a lot of the side characters have these little quirky things about them that make them immediately identifiable. So I try to give all my side characters something like that, something that they're not just a walk on, walk off part. They've got a little line that they threw that's like a throwaway where they something they like, something that's a little different about them. And so I gave that to Casey. I made him into old TV and wanting to be an actor and just little personality quirks so that he would be identifiable as KC. And I didn't think about it much more than that. It was kind of as he was just there for that particular role. And with Casey specifically, I had this idea for a story based on something that happened to me. I was traveling back on a red eye flight and I accidentally sat in the wrong seat because there was, I think they were a mother and daughter, but they had like very similar hair and they were the same race, about the same body type. And one of them was on my row, the one was in the one in front of me. And I went to the bathroom and I came back and I sat next to, I think, the daughter instead of the mother. And I didn't realize that I had done that until I reached under the seat to grab my bag and it wasn't there. And I
Oh,
looked at her, I'm
no.
like, oh wait, you're not the same woman I sat next to when I got on, because it was kind of a dark plane. Because it was a red eye. And I was like, well, what if that happened to a woman and she accidentally sat next to a man who, was similar in body type and hair to her boyfriend, but like wasn't, and fell asleep on his shoulder and then her boyfriend got mad at her and then it could be like a whole setup. And that's what happened to KC because KC being a face shifter, I could put him into that story.
Yep.
So that was another thing where I had two puzzle pieces. I had this story I wanted to write about a mistaken identity on a plane scenario, and I had this character who was face shifting. And when I was trying to figure out how to make those two parts work, or I just grabbed those two parts from my bag and just put them together. And after that, Casey just came to life. Like I didn't realize how much of a character he was until I started doing it. And I actually stopped and wrote that short story from the Dosa Files, The Good Twin, so that I could understand Casey a little better before I wrote her fake superhero boyfriend. Because I wanted to know, like, who is this guy? What makes him tick? Like, he's in uh, Wishing Out a Supervillain. He's there because his brother was killed by bad guys and he wants revenge. Um, so how did he end up with Switch? Because they're very different. And so I went back and kind of figured him out, and then I went forward and wrote him. Um, which is a lot of it is sometimes I'm like, well, this is a good idea, but I have to understand it a little bit more before I write it. And I'll play with an idea in my head, tossing it around for usually about a month before I start outlining it.
Cool. Very cool. So you mentioned the Dosa Files anthologies. You have run quite a few anthologies, not just the Dosa ones. But what was it like opening up your superhero world for other people to write in? I know like people were asking about it and then you got the idea and clearly you didn't hate it because you've done 3 of them now. But was that a little weird having other authors kind of write into your world that you had created?
So when I first started, so I didn't think that anyone would actually do it. Um, I was like, a couple people had asked me about writing stories in the world, but I'm like, oh, it's like two or three people, and that's not enough to do anything with. And I don't know. I just can't see enough writers to make a big story collection being interested in this project. And so it really blew me away that I did get as many submissions as I did for that. I was like, oh well, I guess people do want to write in it. And there was a mix of like some people were obviously they had written a superhero story and then just tweaked it to be in my world. And there were some who had actually written within my world and you could tell the difference. But I kept them based on the quality of the story, not though I do give preference to the ones that are obviously more entwined with the world because I just like it more.
Mhm.
But it's really cool. It's to an extent almost like I was especially so the one that really got me was Amber Gabrielle's Stretch Thin when she
Yeah.
wrote that. It was like, this is almost like reading something I wrote, except I didn't do the work.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting. And it's it lets me chase down more ideas than I could ever handle. And I really like how it comes out. Um so yeah, it's exciting, and I just love that the world gets expanded, and I like other people's takes on it. Sometimes I like to be surprised by my stories, but that doesn't happen very often when you're writing them.
Right, right.
So like I'm like I also just love superhero stories. So just more superhero stories being out there gets me excited. So
Cool. Well, it's super
look,
fun as one who has been in the anthologies. It's really fun uh writing in that world and being able to because you've with what 21 books now in the like just in the main or is it
I want to say
22?
23,
Oh, 23. I'm behind.
but I'm counting Game Changer though, and that hasn't come out
Okay.
yet technically.
Yeah, but we have it, so it counts.
Yeah, yeah,
All of my kids are reading it right now. I got
that's
3
awesome.
copies because I was like, "There's no way I can handle the, 'Are you done yet? Are you done yet?'" But I neglected to get one for me, so that's a problem.
Oh
Uh,
no.
yeah, but I have a lot of other, like, ARCs and stuff, so it's okay. But, yeah, it was fun to be able to because there's such a breadth to the world that you've created now that, it was relaxing almost to just be able to focus on the characters and not have to do any world building and like, "Oh, yeah, I
Yeah.
can reference this person or this group or this whatever," and you kind of already did all the hard work, so
Yeah, and I think that's one reason I write so much in this world is because the foundation has already been set so much. There's a lot of things I don't have to think about that I would have to think if I were starting all over again in another series.
for sure, yeah. So who is your favorite superhero outside of your own, uh, characters?
So my go-to answer is Goose the cat, which is a cheating answer, but I still want to give it. Um, I think it is probably actually Captain Marvel if I have to choose a person. I like her because she's kind of a little bit like me in that she's kind of snarky and flippant, and she seems like she's having fun when she does superhero stuff.
Yes.
Uh, and I ye- I think that the snarky flippant superhero is almost always given to a male character. Like Tony Stark is that. Doctor Strange is that. Um, Ant-Man is kind of that. They're all snarky and flippant. And then you get Wonder Woman, who is compassionate and very serious. And you get Natasha, who can be a little snarky, but she's also just, you know, deadly serious.
Yes.
She's very,
And weighed down.
she's weighed down and dark. And
Yeah.
Captain Marvel, actually, there's some trauma there, but the way she responds to trauma is more jokey, which again is something they usually give to a guy character. But it's
Mhm.
also that's more me. I'm not the character who gets way down. I'm the character who's going to say something snarky and go into space with her cat. That's what I want out of being a superhero. I want to fly when the Marvels trailer came out and she's there with the cat on her shoulder going through space. I remember I made a meme of me with Alfred like this could be
Yes.
us. Alfred's my cat. He's an
Yeah.
orange boy, and I was like, this could be us, Alfred. So yeah, it's definitely Captain Marvel. I also very much like, I'd say my second favorite is probably Doctor Strange. And I have a weakness for Hawkeye because superhero dads should be more of a thing. And I like that they let him eventually, spoilers, keep his family.
Yes, yes, definitely. Oh, yeah. Hawkeye is definitely my favorite, and, yeah, it's the dad thing and also just, whatever team he's on wins. So
Yeah. Well, he's also the common sense one who points out that everything is dumb.
right.
It's that
The
team
city's
dad. We're
flying.
all, yeah.
We're being
I
attacked by
have a bow
robots.
and arrow.
I have a bow.
None of this makes any sense.
Exactly. Yeah.
We need that voice of when you have something that has that element of just over the topness and like superhero, you need that voice of reason who calls it back down to earth, and he is that. And I think he's one of the better ones of that. Sometimes they can come out a little bit too fourth wall breaky, but
Yeah.
he is the human in the middle of gods and robots and super geniuses. So it makes
Right.
sense to him to be a little bit more that voice.
Yeah, for
What
sure.
uh what do you guys think draws us to a specific character? Like for me, I've always been the superheroes I like the most are Batman um or Hawkeye because to me it's like okay, well, they are relatable to me and like their courage feels real because their superpowers are something that could be in existence in the real world. And so it feels like, okay, I've always struggled with, I remember like I love Spider-Man, but I was like, man, like what if the spider bit somebody else? Somebody else could have been Spider-Man. And now apparently there's lots of Spider-Man out there. Uh and so a small part of me was like, well, like what part of him and so but then when as you watch the story, you realize there's elements. The thing that draws you to Spider-Man is yes, he has these powers, but he's really good, or he is snarky, or he's funny, and it's like Iron Man. Like I like Iron Man because he's human, and I love the fact that there's real danger for him in any situation that he goes into, and then you kind of get drawn into their characters. But what is it about a superhero? Is it their powers and what they can do that draw us in, or is it their character and who they are that cause us to be like, yeah, we like him, and yeah, the powers are cool.
I think it's definitely the character for me because like there's different elements or different versions of different characters. Like I don't like the Flash. I like specifically the Justice League Unlimited Flash.
Mhm.
That's my favorite Flash. And um it's the same with oh gosh. Batman's fairly consistent even across the portrayals. Like there's different quality in the portrayals of Batman, I would say, but they keep most of the same core traits. But like I'm trying to think of another one who has had differing versions. I would say
Like Green
Wonder Woman's
Lantern.
yeah, Green Lantern is like multiple people too.
Yeah.
Like I'm a John Smith girl because of Justice
Yes.
League Unlimited. You know, um,
Agreed.
Hal Jordan's okay. There's this one cartoon where the team is doing multiverse stuff and they suddenly get stuck with Hal Jordan for a little bit. Uh, but anyway, so it's the personality. I like them to be a little bit vulnerable. Like what I like about Spider-Man specifically, especially like the Peter Parker Spider-Man and even Miles Morales to an extent, is that they are teenagers. They're
Mhm.
they're like, "Oh, you poor thing. You are kid."
Yes. Yes.
Um and uh what I like about Captain Marvel is I love the stand back up montage. It's one of my favorite moments in a superhero fiction. I didn't realize I needed that, but that's it was something that really got me, and it shows how this has been her all along before she
Yeah.
got her powers. Since she was a little kid, she's always the one who, after she gets knocked down, she stands back up.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about her. That and I do like the snark because like I said, it's that I relate to that. I think there's two elements of characters. There is
Mhm.
uh relatability and there's empathy, and they don't always have to be the same thing. Like uh, I feel for Tony Stark even though I'm different from him, and I feel for Carol though because we're actually fairly similar. And I can like characters on both those wavelengths. Um And I think that's one thing about writing, reading. It increases your empathy skills so that you have to understand characters even if they aren't like you. You have to go in and knows what makes them tick. Which it's almost more fun for me to write characters who I am not like, and because then I get to explore that and find them out. Like I'm writing this. If you do Myers Briggs, he's an ESTJ, which is very different from me. I'm an ENFP,
Mm.
and he's very take charge and he's a little bossy and he uh very pointed in the way he works and just like goes in like a wrecking ball and just takes charge. And I'm like, that's not really me, but he's fun because of that. It's like, okay, well, what are you gonna do now? Oh, that, yeah, sure.
What wouldn't
So
I do?
yeah. Oh,
Yeah, for sure.
he's a man of action.
Yeah.
So I like characters who are consistent and real, have a little bit of vulnerability to them, but I also don't want them to be like, crushed under the weight of their sorrows. Like everybody's got their own tolerance for that. Like some people like the characters who are just like getting piled on. I prefer the
Uh-huh.
ones that have I like the ones that get knocked down but get back up pretty quickly. That's why I like Carol.
Yeah.
Um and eventually a lot of other characters I like, but some of them get really, really down there,
Mhm.
and some stories call for that. But
Yeah.
I, I find it refreshing when you have a character who keeps their dark night of the soul fairly short.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure. But that's an interesting question, and I like that idea. You'd even mentioned that, talking about how reading builds an empathy for things, because that's a question I would have as you guys write characters that are either different from you or writing a villain, because it would be very easy to just say, okay, I don't know much about these characteristics, or I'm going to write a villain, and just it could become very, I don't know if tropish is a word, but just like very one dimensional. This character is bad, and any story, or even if we're just looking at recent, for me the comic book or superhero stories that I'm familiar with, you always have villains, and they're either really good or they're just kind of meh. But to me, what makes a difference is like Thanos. Thanos was one of my favorite characters because even though I could see why he is the villain, I could understand him a little bit. I could understand where he was coming from. It was like, wow, he's got some good points, or he's got, like I liked his purpose that he had, not the actual purpose, but I felt like he was a complex, real character that when you understood him, it kind of made sense how he got to where he was. And so it almost makes him, or it can make a tragic character. So, or even thinking of like Star Wars, Darth Vader. Like we all know Darth Vader is horrible, but we're so happy with his redemption arc in the end because we love him as a character, even though we're willing to gloss over the mass murder, I guess. But that would be just an interesting question of how you guys go about writing either characters that are different from you, or writing a villain. Like, oh, do you want this character to have traits that people can empathize with, or be deeper than just he's bad and this character is good, or this character is good and this character is bad? I don't know if there's a question in there.
There's a lot of commentary, but I don't know
We
that
could all
there's a
just say
question.
yes and move on.
Yes. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean,
go
yeah.
ahead.
I was gonna say it depends. Like some villains have tragic backstories, but I kind of like a good thug who's been given too much power too, just as a straight villain. Because there are a lot of petty criminals out there who if they picked up a power glove or some extra powers, they would just be a menace just because they're petty villains. And in my superhero stories, I tend to write a lot of those type because it's a grounded series, and I have a lot less world destroyers and a lot more bank robbers, if that makes sense. People who are, I think, what comes down between hero and villain is like a villain will often take the easy way, even if it hurts people, to get what they want. And to me, that's the difference between hero and villain 90% of the time. There are some exceptions. You get some uh, ethically driven supervillains, like, right, the ones who have a cause and they're just uh, like Thanos, he's got a cause, and sometimes that is also fun. But I never want to lose the banality of evil. I think in my series, that evil should be a little boring. It should be a little cheap. It should be a little, easy comparatively to what is good and true, but also often hard.
Mhm.
Um, so that's kind of where I come out when I'm doing villains. There will occasionally be an exception, like somebody who is an ideologue who's gotten their thoughts really twisted about their means for doing things. But yeah, and also at that pace, you just give them a cause and then take away their empathy, and it usually
Yeah.
works pretty well.
Right. Right. Well,
Well,
yeah.
I also like that and appreciate that. I don't know if this is the correct way of looking at it, but I've always thought, World War II, it was very clear good and evil, very separate. And I feel like, especially in entertainment, we have gotten to a point to where we really try to blur the line or almost celebrate the darkness sometimes in a lot of the stories that are coming out. And I do, that's one of the things, it's one of the many things I love about Lord of the Rings is it's just very, very clear
Mhm.
the difference between good and evil. And I guess to put it bluntly, like, you're never sad when an orc gets dispatched because they're just purely evil. Like
Yeah.
it's almost as if evil has been embodied, and there is no redeeming quality. I haven't watched it, but the idea of an orc having a family at home and going out to like that just doesn't really appeal to me because it takes away a little bit from the purpose of the story in my mind. But
Yeah,
still,
it works in context, I would
sure.
say. So, yeah, I mean, I could get into the whole like Tolkien struggled with the idea of orcs his entire writing career. He rewrote their origin story like 3 times because the idea of a creation that is still pure evil just doesn't fit with his
Correct, yeah.
system because evil can't create. So
Mhm.
he can only corrupt. So, can you corrupt a creature to the point where you are breeding a race that was irredeemable? And he went over. Originally, they were corrupted elves. I think later they became corrupted men, or maybe I've got that backwards.
I don't
I think
remember.
they ended up with yeah. So because the Silmarillion orcs or Silmarillion orcs and the History of Middle Earth orcs have different origin stories. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure. Um,
I think
so
Corrupted
it,
Elves was
it's the more canon
the
because
one that
usually
fairly,
Silmarillion
yeah.
goes yeah.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, it does it is an interesting thought, like, I think he even in the end, I think what he came up with for Lord of the Rings was that without the evil behind them, they kind of just like ants without a leader
Mm,
kind of disseminate, but he was playing with that idea up until his death because it is kind of a tricky thing. Can you make a race that is seemingly intelligent but has no choice for redemption? And, it is a question, like, which I'm not sure. There is a good answer for that.
for sure.
But
For sure.
it's a quirk of the fantasy genres. You want that force of evil, which I don't know. I like how they did it in The Lord of the Rings because it shows that obviously orcs do breed. Like they're coming from somewhere. So they would have had to have families. Like and they are because there are half orcs, they are interchangeable with humans. The them coming out of slime pits in the movie is actually a really weird addition, which I was like, what is this? How was this working? But yeah, so they do have to breed. And they are self-interested. Like they're interested in their self-preservation and stuff. So I don't know. I didn't mind it for the thing, especially because in the end they make the choice of evil in what they do without spoilers. It's like they choose the path of Sauron over the path of possible redemption that is offered to them, which is it's not book canon, but it's an interesting way to get over that problem, how they
Sure,
handled it.
Mhm.
for sure. I often wonder
A
if
bit of
this
a
is
Rings of Power defender 'cause
no, yeah,
it
that's
gets a
fine.
bad rap for what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, no, for sure.
The
Well, we've talked about that even recently in terms of, I think when I first watched it, sometimes it matters how I go into watching or reading something with expectations, and it's almost like on a second viewing. If I just view
Mhm.
this story on, so it's kind of like when you talked about being a defender of the Hobbit movie series, as hey, this isn't an adaptation of the book; it's more of an adaptation of a prequel to the movies. It's like okay,
Yep.
well, I guess that makes sense, and you could enjoy it on its own that way.
Mhm.
And I can think of a number of stories, and Rings of Power would be like that. Instead of like going in and wanting it to be just being dropped back into the world of the first 3 movies,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah,
its
I think
own
that's
story.
wild to be won over to the Peter Jackson movies that I was not I like them, but I was not initially as sold on them as some of the other people were. Just because there's certain changes that really bugged me for my own personal taste. I think mainly the way they treated Faramir.
Yes.
I'm not a
Yeah.
fan of movie Faramir, and he was one of my favorite characters. So I went into it a little more open-minded about adaptation because once you're disappointed once, it's easier to
Yeah.
handle like, okay, well, they changed this. And to me, what really matters is not so much the story accuracy as the theming. And I feel like Rings of Power theming is really spot on comparatively. As far as like the way they handle things like the faithful in Numenor. I didn't think I would ever see a conservative religious movement being oppressed by the upcoming, new thoughts be handled as the good guys in a major uh production. And they did that. The faithful are the good guys and they are that. And it is definitely very Catholic coded in their imagery, but it's still what it is.
Mhm.
which makes sense because Tolkien was Catholic.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, for sure, for sure. And that's a good
But
point.
yeah,
I think.
and it oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say is in a similar vein when we went and saw, I know Captain Marvel is your favorite, Heidi. When we went and saw it in theaters, I remember walking away hating that movie, like everything about it. And then we recently watched through all of the MCU with the kids, and we got to the and I was like, "Ah, do we really have to watch this one?" Well, yeah, because you kind of have to know who she is when she shows up and blows up everything, and you wonder why do we need any other superheroes? And and then we watched Captain Marvel, and I was like, I saw those themes, like the getting back up, and like all I remembered was, well, she's just perfect at everything, so why do you need anybody else? But like watching it the second time, I was like, oh wait, no, she was like not good at things. She just kept getting up, kept getting up, kept getting up, and that was the theme of her whole life. And I liked the movie a lot better on the second viewing. And it was just interesting how like sometimes you can just go, okay, maybe I went into this with the wrong mindset, or maybe I was in a bad mood, or maybe it just didn't get it the first time. Um, and even like it was funny kind of rewatching all of the MCU that way was like when you have to wait 2 years between movies or 6 months between movies or whatever, as opposed to just like bam, 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 we're gonna watch, or what do you do? Double feature tonight. I was like, we had to wait 2 years to find out what happened, but you guys get to know now, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's a faster, like at that faster pace, it actually works a lot better. A lot of those movies worked a lot better. The ones that I kind of was like, I didn't like those, and I'm not looking forward to watching it again. Were like, oh, I really liked those. And some of the ones where I was like, oh, I remember really loving this. I walked away and was like, it wasn't the best. It was very interesting. So I
Yeah,
think
okay.
stories deserve a second chance.
Oh, for
Usually.
Yeah,
sure.
most do. Yeah, and I think we tend to like do first impressions on things, and a lot of things stand up better on rewatch. Like,
Hmm.
um, especially because there's like things that you might not realize. Take it back to Rings of Power. There were elements of Rings of Power that I was really hating until the season one finale,
Mm.
and I started to suspect about midway through what they were doing with something, and was like, oh, if they do that, that's actually not it makes up for a lot of these scenes that there's a certain character who is a jerk, and we're the show plays it like we're supposed to be rooting for him, and I'm like, wait a minute, we're not supposed to be rooting for this guy. They're giving him all the trappings of someone we should be rooting for him, but if you look at his actions along the way, he's not a good guy, and he was not a good guy.
Pure
Spoilers.
evil.
There you go.
He
Pure
was
evil.
evil.
Mom, Dad, don't touch.
But I had friends who were complaining because they thought that character was the new Aragorn, and I'm like, no, if you watch it again, that's not the new Aragorn. Trust me.
Yeah.
Yes, and those, what's with the elements of that show that I loved were the time they had to develop those characters and to give it. But I like my favorite part of that show is the relationship between, Elrond and
And Durin.
Durin.
Aaron. Yes, just
Yes.
because
Oh man,
because
that is so good.
I love I love the fact that they have taken, the angst between elves and dwarves and built in a friendship, but a friendship that feels like it's got those pressures around it to where, they know each other, but they're also being pulled in different directions and there's times where their motivations are pure, but it looks anyways, just the complexity of that friendship and the power of both those characters. I would have loved a whole season of just them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm almost always the one who's like, okay, are we gonna get Elrond this episode? Or are we gonna get Elrond this episode? Because he was my favorite. I call him
Really,
baby Elrond because he's so little.
he is.
Yeah.
He
Yes.
is.
Yes, but I like yeah, that's my favorite character for sure.
Yep.
Um,
Those are my favorite
yeah.
scenes.
So this is a bit of a split off, but as we were talking about this, one of the things that I am very curious because I've always wondered this about comic book authors or authors of superhero stories in general. When you are writing a character as a superhero and giving them a power of some kind, is it based on, okay, this power is designed to help draw out the character of this person, or is it, I just think it would be really cool if someone could do this?
It's six of one, half a dozen of the other. Uh,
Fair enough.
so there's some characters that their ability says something about their personality, And there's some characters that I just really need this ability for the story to work. Lale with her tech manipulation is one of
That's how
the
you
second.
pronounce it?
Yeah, it's Lale.
Oh, goodness.
It's a
Uh,
Persian name. Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
cool.
Lale. She I knew that disruptor cuffs were gonna be a real problem in the story for several scenes, because Prism and Fate are not idiots. They're not gonna let the kids with superpowers just run around doing whatever they want. So if I have a character who can manipulate the disruptor cuffs so Prism and Fate think the kids are under control when they're really not, it really helps the story. So I'm like, Lale needs to have that power. So that happens. And then Marco's were also a little bit similar because I needed a power that would flip out and be hard for him to control. Um, I also kind of had an idea that he was going to end up kind of mentored by wildfires. That just kind of happened. But other characters like Fade's character, Fade and Jake both have powers that are tied into their personality and growth. Jake's is that he always feels like he's being pulled in a million different directions by a million different forces, and he's trying to struggle to keep himself whole. So I literally make him break apart. And Fade has that whole thing where he can't be tied down. He's not containable. He's lacks an anchor. So I made him,
Phase
be
through
able to
things.
go through things. Yeah. So when I'm approaching a story, I have to ask myself, well, what's important to this character? Is it that they have a power that says something about them, or is their power just not not essential to the story? Like Nixie's has a cool power, but it doesn't really say much about her. It's water. It's just I hadn't had a water manipulator yet. It would be fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll do both, and sometimes the power will evolve with them, and it will become important to them. Other times it just kind of stays as what they are. I tend to fall back on the superhero type or Superman type where they can fly and do some basic stuff. So I because it is such a common, thread through superhero stuff that and a lot of times those were not meant to be the main characters, but they eventually got to be somehow. But yeah, I or super strong ones.
Right.
That's not a very interesting power to me, but I ended up having to write a super strong hero with Sam because he sent a cat gift to Braden. I'm like, wait a minute, why is this character sending cat gifts to Braden? I need to know.
That's awesome.
Well, I'm sure this is the question that
Mm.
you guys get asked the most in terms of like what character would you be from one of your stories, but so I'm sure it's been asked many times. But if you had to pick one of the superpowers from one of the characters that you have written, which power would you choose if you could?
So this isn't the character I would be, but the superpower I'd want would be Bee from rescuing a supervillain because she could turn into a cat. She just hangs out as a house cat. That's her entire power.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
And I want to be a cat.
There you go.
I like that. I like that. Janelle, what about you?
Oh, flying, always.
Like,
Always flying.
oh yeah, it'd be hard. Yeah, hard to beat. Hard to beat.
Yeah.
For sure.
I didn't give any of my characters flight in the two stories that I wrote. But I was working like when I wrote Playdate for the first anthology, it was very much okay, what powers okay, these are all moms. What powers would be really helpful if you were a mom? And so it was like, hey, cloning myself so I can keep talking to my friend and push my kid on the swing. Like be able to see things like 60 seconds in advance and
So, was there a little bit of wishful thinking?
so much wishful thinking, yes.
Wouldn't it be nice if?
You know what? I could just like turn acorns into something else and then voila, any costume my child wants, It'd be great.
It's the small things in life that we would
So,
really appreciate.
but then it was like, okay, how would they also because they're villains, right? So how would they use those powers in villainy?
They're
It's like,
they're
okay.
they're acorn transformations.
Well, like transforming anything, right? In the
So
one she picks up
it's not just
stones, but
acorns.
it's not just she can transform matter. She's a
For sure.
but it was like, oh man, um, forgery, right? That's what you would do with that if you were a villain. So
I guess that goes back to Heidi, like what you're saying about choosing the easiest path instead of the correct path.
right.
Yeah.
Let's
Well, that's what I was going through my character's main faults, just to see what they were, and I was like, I gave Fade the main fault is just that he's lazy. Like he's always taken the easy route up until he joined the hero path and had to stick it out because he's lazy. He doesn't want to do the hard stuff. He just wants to break into like walk through walls and take what he wants because it's easy. It's not because he's a in the long run, but that short term gain to just take what you want, uh, you know, irregardless of long-term consequences.
for sure.
So
Yeah.
It just
I
reminds
said
me of
irregardless. I should have said that.
It's all right. It made me feel at home. Our dad always says that.
well, that just reminds me of the scene. I think is it The Mask where he's realizing these powers that he has and he puts the mask on and he's talking about all the things he could do. He's like, I could be a superhero, but first, and then he goes
I'm
and
gonna rob a
robs
bank.
a bank. That's right. That's right. Uh,
Oh,
that's awesome.
it's been a minute.
Yes.
Oh
Yes.
goodness.
Right
Cool.
on. Right on. Well, we are approaching the 1 hour mark, and
Yeah.
that's not like the hard cutoff, but this has been awesome. And I would like to talk a little bit about because this latest story or anthology of stories, has it come out or is it coming out? I'd like to talk about that just a little bit before we wrap up.
Well, I think
It
Heidi, you've
came
had like
out.
4 things come out recently or come.
Yeah, well, Game Changer comes out June 27th. Uh, the the anthologies came out the 17th.
17.
It was like a week, 2 weeks ago, and yeah, so yeah, the anthologies are the most recent. And then there was Courtney and Superhero right before that. I kind of stored up and released everything all at once.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the anthologies are great. That this time I had 2 volumes worth of stories. I think it's 17 total. Yeah, it's 17. And 17 total, 16 authors because I have 2 stories, one in each, and then there's 16 other authors involved. So it's a really good range this time. There's some stuff that's more like geared towards younger readers. There's some stuff that's a little bit more of I would say character pieces, not a lot of action, but a lot of thinking about what it means to have powers and the responsibility of them. Um, Things like that. And some very interesting takes on what it means to be a hero, I think. And some also just some standard kind of fun, technical action pieces too.
Yep.
So it's a good mix.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's awesome.
And people can find those.
Yes, they're
Awesome.
available on Amazon and in Kindle Unlimited. So yeah, and these ones they are Kindle Unlimited, so they are Amazon exclusive right now. I do have a bunch of copies at home, so
Yeah.
I'm going to be going to I've kind of put up some more in-person appearances now that I've been settled into West Virginia. So I'm going to Realm Makers Expo in Grand Rapids. I'm going to the Muddy Moddy one somewhere in Ohio, I forget, and there's a West Virginia Book Fest in Charleston, and then I've got another one in Pennsylvania coming up this fall. So I've got a lot of in-person events to hit this year, so it's gonna be fun. So
Fun. You're gonna be busy.
yeah,
And I'm excited about seeing you at Realm Makers. So
it'll be fun. I've got my Harfoot costume I'm working on, so
fantastic. I still have to figure out what I'm wearing. But are you gonna do another one shot at Realm Makers?
oh, I should.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. So I did the superhero one shot last year, and I might try to do that again. Just because I haven't touched that series in a while. But I've also been playing with my fearsome critters, which are Tales of the Lumberwoods. I've got a lot of material built up for that. I basically built stat blocks for gumbaroos and hide behinds and snow snakes and
Eskimo bear.
yeah, all the things that they're just quote campfire story creatures.
Cool.
And I'm bringing in some Native American stuff. Like I'm going to add a Wendigo and a Thunderbird this time, and then also modern stuff like not deer. Not deer are creepy.
Okay. We have to go look all of these things up
I
now.
have to look at not deers.
Well, I know we had a conversation because you like mentioned snow snakes at one point, and I was like, and Eskimo bears because across the Great Divide, and you were like, no, what?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's like,
they're
you
that
get my reference, and you were like, no, I don't really.
no, this is yeah, this is oh gosh, there's a cat behind the computer. Okay.
Aw, Vivian.
Well, that's actually really fun to hear because because Mission Impossible has come out and they're doing all the press circuits with Tom Cruise, and he's just talking about how all of the ideas he has for future movies and thinking of all the work he's done, just thinking, wow, how does anybody do that much? And so when I see all the stories that you have written, and then it sounds like you have enough material to keep writing books for many, many years. And that's
Yeah,
actually, I think
but
that's awesome. I think that's awesome. So just like, yeah, the excitement behind that and just, yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. Do you already have next stories in the like well underway in the works?
so I am about 33,000 words into, it's about a halfway point. Well, maybe a little over half, I think, for the Supervillains Bodyguard, which is a story of it's my first super powered woman with a non-powered guy. So this character is the main character is this guy who he's former military, he's a mechanic. Like I said, he's a man of action, and he sees a uh he goes to his mentor's funeral, who he hasn't seen in many years, and the mentor's daughter in the parking lot to the cemetery is suddenly accosted by supervillains, and he runs in, and he had a beer bottle because he was there doing like this military thing where he pours a drink out for an old comrade, and he just throws the beer bottle and knocks out the guy who's grabbing her, grabs her in his truck, pulls her into his truck, rams his truck into the supervillain's car so that they're disabled, and then peels out of there. And she's like, "You just got attacked by a supervillain." She says, "I am a supervillain." And so, yeah, so it's like I put this guy who he has no powers, but he is very practical and just will do the thing that nobody expects. Like he'll just pull out a gun and start shooting if he needs to. So I'm having fun with that because it's like usually the the guy has a, but this guy he doesn't, but he's just the way he finds to work with what he's got is a lot of fun to do. So that's coming out. And after that, I have like another in the young adult series I need to write, which I've got the emotional part of it down, like the issue between the characters, but I still don't have a plot, which is kind of important.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then I've got like 2 or 3 side characters who probably want their own series or book at this point. So I'll have to see who talks loudest next.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Which of the voices inside our heads are most demanding? Love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Heidi, and giving us an hour of your time. We are very excited about all of your next stories, and I'm really excited. There's still quite a few of your books that I haven't read yet, and I've read a lot of them. But
They're a decent amount out there.
I have all of these things on my list, and I'm like, but I have to read all the Heidi books. So someday. But yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. It was very, very fun. So
Oh, good.
here
Well,
on my porch.
yeah. Well, we try to keep it casual. It's fun, and we just kind of go where the conversation leads us. And so thanks for following us along. And for everybody else who is watching or listening, we just want to thank you for joining us in the storm cave and coming in out of the storm for a little while.